بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
ألف لام ميم. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون. وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون. وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم.
Immigrated to the U.S. about 200 years ago. So from my father's side, my mother's side is German and Danish. So I'm sort of a mix American, but I went to University of Pennsylvania undergraduate, and I was an English major there. So my first love is very much literature. And because, as you know, university is expensive in the U.S., I had to get I got a fellowship, a Navy scholarship that paid for my schooling. In return, I had to spend a couple of years in the Navy. So after graduation, during one of those years, I was sent to the UN, and I lived in Egypt and Syria. And during this time, I started taking private lessons, and I became totally fascinated with Arabic, with its complexity, with its richness and the history of the region and Islam as well. And it was this time when I changed my mind. I was all along thinking I'd go back to graduate school and get a PhD in English literature, but because I was really getting excited about Arabic, I thought, well, maybe I'll delay that and maybe get a PhD in comparative literature. So anyway, I got out of the Navy and I thought, well, before I go to graduate school, I really need to work on my Arabic more. So I went for 2 years to Cairo and I studied Arabic intensively, the Arabic Language Institute and the Center for Arabic Study Abroad. And from there, I went to Berkeley, and actually Professor Larkin in my first year convinced me that rather than doing comparative literature, since I was so excited about Arabic and maybe the job opportunities would be better if I focused on Arabic, that I should continue in that. And this is what I specialize in at Berkeley, studying classical Arabic poetry. And I guess this is how I came to, through my mentor advisor at Berkeley, James Monroe. He really was the pioneer in studying ring composition in classical Arabic poetry. And surprisingly, for such a rich tradition, I found like in the 19th and 20th century, there are many Western scholars who are criticizing the so-called disunity of the Arabic poem. So this turned into, with his guidance, this turned into my dissertation showing how ring composition was a very common feature in classical Arabic literature, and especially classical Arabic poems. And this turned into my, I guess, dissertation and first book, Abundance from the Desert. And also after that, I was also kind of surprised to see the same sort of criticism after I graduated from Berkeley, directed at the Quran. Just as many critics from the 8th, 19th, and 20th centuries in the West were criticizing the poetry for being haphazardly organized. A substantial number of critics were saying the same thing about the Quran. So I basically, again, sort of encouraged by James Monroe, who had talked about Surah Al-Baqarah, that he thought was probably or likely had a ring composition or a concentric organization. He encouraged me to look at that. And I did, and sure enough, this very common literary form that's not just in Arabic literature, other classical literatures as well, but seemed like it was very clearly in the Quran. And so this led to a first study on Surah Al-Baqarah, and then in turn, the book Structure and Quranic Interpretation, which discusses ring composition and symmetry in the Quran, how it's very much of an organizing device of keeping the surahs together. And also it seems to be a way to guide us to the meaning, or helps orient the reader or the listener. And that very often, according to these concentric organizations, the main meaning is located in the center. So basically this is the main idea of my book, Structure and Quranic Interpretation. And also, I guess I should mention why I'm here in Kuwait. While my 7 years at Berkeley, although I love California and love being at Berkeley, I was missing the immersion in the Arabic world. And so I was fortunate enough that when I was about to graduate, this new university, American University of Kuwait, had opened up and they're looking for an Arabic professor. So I applied, and I've been lucky enough to be here for the last 14 years teaching. I also came to the Quran from literature, as I mentioned, and I was raised as a Christian, and just I've been totally amazed at the composition of the Quran, the structure and the power of its message, and the beauty. And I converted here in Kuwait to Islam, mainly basically because of the literary power and beauty of the Quran. And essentially there's the same message that I saw in the Bible. So it seemed to me clear that this was a divinely inspired scripture message.